Hello athletes, this is Travis coming back with another training video, and today's topic we are going to be talking about how to handle illness with your training and how to kind of balance and accommodate for illness. And so certainly a topic that's going to be universally applicable for the entire athletic population, not just rowing, where a lot of the topics on this channel focus on. So if you're an athlete and you've ever been curious of exactly what you needed to be able to do when you're training, or when you should take off and when you should push through, then this is definitely going to be the video for you. So clearly there's going to be lots of different situations, lots of different types of illnesses, sicknesses that you're going to have to deal with throughout your life and throughout your training career. And each of those situations is going to certainly have a slightly different approach, but there are definitely universals that you want to consider through it. And kind of the biggest thing that I want people taking away from this video is getting out of that need to kind of push through it and just suck it up. There needs to be a bit of humility that comes with the fact that you're a human being and you have an incredible immune system to kind of deal with that. But that immune system draws from the same energy reserves that you would be drawing from if you are exercising. And so if you are exerting yourself physically while you're also trying to combat any kind of infection or illness, then you're going to be taking energy from those energy reserves and diverting them away from what should be your priority at that time, which is to combat that illness. All right. And so, in terms of the symptoms and the signs, kind of a rule of thumb, a lot of people, will say kind of anything kind of below the neck, you want to kind of take off for. Anything above the neck is okay. The neck is kind of a point where a lot of stuff happens, so I don't like using the neck as a reference point. So I would say anything below the chin that you're feeling is almost a definite, you need to kind of back off and rest and let your energy be used for that immuno response. Anything above, all right, is kind of a situation dependent. And so we can talk about kind of the most common things, the cold, maybe the flu. The cold is something that we're all going to get on a regular basis. Certainly if you're training on a team and you're around a lot of other people, then you're going to get sick more often. I've been amazed. Certainly I transitioned in terms of a lot of things I was doing for my health and eating 2 years ago when I stepped away from coaching teams. But I've literally not gotten sick in those 2 years, and I would regularly get sick when I was coaching, and I think it's just because you're surrounded in this pool of germs. Kids are dirty and they get you sick. So for all the stuff that teachers are dealing with in COVID times, they still deal with some crazy stuff in the regular jobs, and it's kind of being constantly exposed to a lot of unhealthy people. Unhealthy habits and germs is one of them. But if you're on that team, then you're almost inevitably going to be catching colds, either every year, maybe a couple times a year, every other year, whatever it may be. And a lot of situations, a lot of people, they're just going to say, just kind of push through it, just kind of work through that cold, because it is, in the grand scheme of things, it is a low-level illness. I am definitely not in that camp. With my athletes, I am always in a situation where I tell them, if you do not feel like you are physically in a position to perform in a race, then you should not be training to compete in a race. All right, you should not be training to improve your performance in a race if you could not actually step up and perform in that given moment. All right, and so if you can come in, and most people will be like, they'll be less willing to race when they're sick than just go and get it in a training session when they're sick. And so that helped me kind of get them to realize that, hey, you need to back off. You need to, one, stay away. Certainly if you're in that group environment, if you are part of a team, then you are responsible for increasing the performance of that team. All right, and if you go and you get your teammates sick, then you are working against that goal. All right, and so it is an extremely selfish thing to do, I would say, as an athlete, to go to practice when you're sick. All right, because another thing to kind of point out is that when you are there and when you're training, you are breaking the body down. All right, any training session is meant to break the body down so that the body can then be stimulated and encouraged to make a training adaptation. All right, and so you are even more vulnerable, once you've begun that training session, certainly at the end of the training session, to any kind of invasion, any kind of infection, illness, all right, because your energy reserves have been depleted, all right, and that energy is not available for that immediate immune system response if something gets into your system that shouldn't be there. And so definitely you don't want to consciously bring in something that is an invasive body into that situation where all your teammates are compromised. And I remember speaking to a parent that was an Olympic athlete, and they would talk about how as they got closer and closer to the Olympics, how they would essentially social distance themselves, in the parlance of our recent times, because they knew that when they were training at that level, they're compromised after their sessions, and so they would finish their session, they would immediately kind of spread out and distance themselves because they didn't want to risk any kind of infection that close to the Olympic Games. And it's it's the same principle kind of drawn into the team. So if you are sick, don't go to practice, all right? And as a youth coach, I would deal with this a lot with parents. Parents would send their kids, and in a lot of situations parents think that their coach is their babysitter for their kid, and I understand. I have a young one. I understand the challenges of stopping whatever your plans are, whatever your work responsibilities are, to tend for a sick child. But unfortunately, parents of teenagers seem all too comfortable not having their kids stay home if they're sick, and they will just send them to practice as if we are a babysitter, all right? And in a lot of situations, I would have the athlete come. It's very clear from the body language that they're not feeling well. I'd ask them if they're not feeling well. They'd say they don't feel well, their parents made them come to practice, or they felt like they had to come to practice because they didn't want to miss anything. And I would just have to encourage that kid to, either head home, if they could head home, or stay on land, rest and relax, maybe stay in the office and just chill until they could go home, because what was most important for the athlete in that situation was to let the body tackle that illness, all right? And so what are the signs? Muscle fatigue, certainly any kind of soreness, any kind of unusual aches and pains, sore throats, obviously cough. All those things are kind of more common signs of illness coming in. And if that happens, you should immediately, stop your training and let your body recover, all right? And a good majority of people are good with that, but they're not good with resting for the amount of time that it takes to get the body ready to get back into training, all right? And so this was another universal that I would tell my athletes, you need to stay away until you feel 100% ready to come back to practice. You feel totally normal, you don't feel sick at all anymore, and then you need to wait an entire day until you come back and start training, all right? And so your body's ability to go about its day is very different than your body's ability to conduct, a training session, all right? To break down the body, induce a training stimulus, create a lot of fatigue, and go on, all right? And so it takes a lot less effort and energy to just walk around during the day, do your work, if it's cognitive work, do your studies in school to think, than it is to exert yourself at a high level to improve your performance at maximal effort. And so that was it. I would say, wait until you're perfectly healthy, and then come the day after that. And that was kind of my buffer zone, safe zone, to make sure that athletes were, truly ready to get back and stimulate. And even in that situation, I would generally change the training for them, when they first came back. And so if they came back and we were supposed to be doing some kind of hard pieces that day, or even a long, hard, steady state, then they would not do that session. All right, I would still let them ease in. So usually I like to just give a UT2 and an interval setup. And so I would say, do 10 minutes of UT2 and repeat that 3 to 6 times with as much rest as you want in between each one. And let's just see how you feel. And if the next day, they felt all right, but they weren't feeling 100%. The next day, all right, let's do, a couple 20-minute things of UT2. And then hopefully by the third day, they're all right to kind of do a normal session, all right? And then we can kind of dive back in. But people operate too much in the realm of I wish, or I hope, or I want this to be the case, and not this is what happened, all right? This is the situation that I'm in. This is what I'm dealing with, all right? You cannot train effectively on hope. All right, you can only train on data and insight and experience and intuition. All right. And so hope is not a training factor or training consideration. All right. And people come in and like, well, I want to feel better. I want to get right back in. Or coaches are like, well, I need this person in my first boat and we're doing pieces today. And if that person's not in the boat, then I got to switch the lineup and it's going to disrupt our preparation. That is hope, all right? They're saying that I really wish this was the case and I didn't have to deal with this thing that is actually happening, all right? And to that I say, you got to grow up. You got to wake up. You got to be mature about it. You got to make good decisions, and you got to work with what you have in that moment, in that situation. And so take your time. Get yourself back into it when you're completing some sessions, when you can complete a UT2, a good, aggressive UT2 for whatever your normal median distance is, then you can go on and you can do the other stuff, whether it's AT transport, even a UT1. I would not do a UT1 coming right back into it. I would at least get a day or two of UT2. Now, if you're talking about food poisoning, something like that, something that is not necessarily an assault on your immune system, and you're out, or a lot of female athletes, their menstruation cycle would be disruptive for them, and so and some are worse than others, and that might pull them out of a practice for a day, but they can get right back in the next day. All right. And another thing that you got to do as a coach and athlete is you have to consider yourself from a personal, individual context. You can't say, well, this person is doing that or that person is doing that, so then I must need to do the same thing. All right. We're all different. All right. We all kind of react different. We all recover different, and you have to take that into account. All right. If you go in, and this is a big thing, especially for me when I'm training an athlete. If you go into a training session compromised, you are not going to achieve what we need to achieve for that training session. All right. People are on this idea that if you just put in the work, you're going to get better. And that's complete bullshit. All right. It is not true. All right. The work you need to put in is meant to induce a training stimulus. And in order to induce a training stimulus, you have got to stimulate the body to make an adaptation. And you've got to stimulate the body at its threshold of oxygen utilization, at its threshold of the actual aerobic threshold, at its threshold of oxygen transport, at its threshold of lactate tolerance, at lactate production removal. You have got to give a little stimulus at that threshold and do it. And if you are compromised to the point where you cannot reach your threshold, all right, and don't confuse feeling something is hard with actually getting to the point of performance where you should be getting, all right? And so, if I'm used to sitting down and I'm used to doing 2K repeats, averaging a 145, and that's what I usually do. I do my 2K repeats, I average 145, I start a little slower, finish a little bit faster, and I come into that session and I'm sick, I can guarantee you that a 149, 150 is gonna feel just as hard as that 145, but you have not come anywhere close to that speed that you need to stimulate the body to make that adaptation, all right? And people think that just because something is hard, that your body is going to adapt to it. No, your body is going to adapt to the level of performance that it is used to or that it is not used to, and it needs to become used to, all right? And so if you go in, you're doing a steady state, it's a super crappy day, you're slow, you feel like crap, you're not able to focus on good repetition, developing good muscle memory because you're just trying to survive and you feel horrible and you're not focused on the quality of stroke you're taking and you're not even going fast in the first place, you are not going to improve from that session. What you are going to do is you're going to take the energy away from your immune system that it needs to attack whatever invasion is happening, all right? Some virus, bacteria, whatever it might be, all right? You need to kind of accommodate that, all right? And you need to make sure that body is well equipped to do it. And so, coming back, all right? This is where things get tricky because there's a lot of illnesses that we'll get where there are kind of residual symptoms for a long time. And that's where that kind of above the chin comes into play, all right? So if you get a cold, once you've essentially combated and gotten over that cold, you're probably still gonna have like a stuffy nose, for a runny nose, for a long time, maybe even a little bit of sinus headache. You're gonna have that maybe for a week, 2 weeks afterwards, all right? That's where we say if your only symptom is above the chin, you're fine, all right? If it's just a runny nose, if you're dealing with the aftermath of, of an illness, but your body is truly ready to perform, again, if you could go and you could sit down and you could do a 2,000 meter max effort and be within a couple percentage points of your best, then you're fine to train. If you can't do that, then you shouldn't be training to do that. All right, so that's it. Headaches. Headaches, there's lots of different kinds of headaches. I've had situations, and this is really hard, but I have situations where I really feel like crap during the day. My head hurts, I got a mild headache, I'm, really moody, I'm not in a good mood, and I'll force myself to go in and just sit down on an erg or get in a boat, and after 10 minutes, I feel great, all right? So there are definitely situations where you just need to get out and get moving. And so if you're not feeling good, it's not an illness symptom, you're just not feeling good, your head hurts, whatever, you're stressed, maybe you're a little bit tired, fatigued, try it. Try doing some exercise. It's hard as a rower to do that because going to the boathouse, getting your boat down to the water, getting in your boat and there, only to find out that 5-10 minutes in that you really shouldn't be doing it, you should go back and rest. That's a huge time sink. But for most people, throw on some shoes, go for a little run in that situation. Go down the stairs, hop on an erg, whatever it may be to get moving. And so those things you might find is all right, but again, that is above the chin, all right? It's not symptoms below. It is not a sore throat. It is not a cough. It is not kind of achy, tired muscles. Those are all signs that you need to rest, all right? Give the body the time it needs to, all right? And then final takeaway. And this is what really leads people to make bad decisions when it comes to training, is this idea of, I don't want to fall behind, or I don't want to miss out, all right? That is such a misnomer in training, all right? Is that essentially, especially for your aerobic system, for the most part, once you've made an adaptation, you've made that forever, all right? Your only limitation to being at that point again is conditioning. And conditioning is very easy to achieve, all right? I won't say easy. Conditioning is simple to achieve in the case of it doesn't take a lot of time, all right? And so if you lose a week because you get a really bad flu, and you come back and you're like, oh, I'm a week behind, blah, 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 chill, all right? Don't worry about it, all right? The worst thing that you can do is come back a couple days early and then prolong your body's ability to get back to where it should be for training, all right? So if you come back 2-3 days early, and then it takes you a week and a half to truly get back to where you would have been if you had waited those extra 2 or 3 days, and you've lost basically quality training time for that whole period, you've done yourself a disservice, all right? And when you do get back after a longer break, sure, you're gonna be a little bit sluggish for the last couple of days because of conditioning, all right? Because if your body is not using the motion that you need it to on a daily basis, if you generally take more than 3 days off, your muscles are gonna start to kind of forget and decondition a little bit quickly, but they're gonna pop back very quickly. All right, so you take 3 days off, a day or two back in, and you're gonna be right back where you left off. A week off, it might take you 4 or 5 days conditioning, get back where you are, and then you should be right in, kicking off where you were when you left. All right, and so you got to get out of this idea. And then for rowing specifically, the issue is, I'm afraid I'll lose my seat in a boat. And I had a podcast conversation. If you guys aren't familiar with Rowing Resource, that's where I do a podcast where I talk with kind of top coaches in the sport, just long conversation style about anything from training methodology to coaching philosophy to organization management. But one of those conversations was with Justin Moore, very successful coach, is now the senior coach for Hydro, the new indoor rower company that's been coming onto market. And in that conversation, Justin and I were talking about illness, and Justin was joking in the sense of with his athletes knew that because there was such competition, if they stepped away for any period of time, even a day, then that left a seat open for their competition to step in. And if that competition stepped in and suddenly that boat's moving really good with other athletes, then they might not have that seat when they come back, all right? And so that is an unfortunate situation of the environment and rowing. As a coach, I can say that in order to stop a decision from making, or stop an athlete from making bad decisions because of that, you need to create an environment where they know that it is okay to focus on being healthy first, and they know that the act of focusing on being healthy is not going to compromise their position on the team when they come back, all right? That it may immediately be challenged once they get back, and that might be motivation for them to ensure that they are coming back ready to go, ready to hit the ground running, and not just kind of, easing the way back in when they're only at 80% instead of 100%. But that has got to come from the coaching, staff down. and then the athletes will embrace that. They'll hear that, they'll embrace that, and they'll take that into account with their decision making. But if you have this cutthroat environment where it is like you miss a day of practice because you have a cold, then you could lose your seat. Then you're shooting yourself in the foot, because you're going to have a lot of athletes that at the end, at the championship season, that they're not going to be as good as they could have been. And maybe you're even going to have an athlete that's afraid to speak out and say how they really feel. And maybe a couple days before that championship, or even the day before the championship, they start coming down with something and they're afraid to speak out because they're afraid of losing, because you created this environment where they need to kind of hunker down and protect themselves in their position. All right, so that's a challenge to the coaches, to create an environment that prioritizes the health and well-being of the athlete over a race result, or certainly over a practice. But we'll see. All right, we'll see if coaches can step up to that challenge. I'm not too hopeful on that based on my observations of the sport, but athletes can at least make good decisions for themselves. All right, because you are in control of that. You are in control of what you do and what you don't do, and how you take care of yourself. But that's it. So that's my talk about what you need to do, how you need to address being ill, why you need to do that. So hopefully that makes you more confident in the future to make those decisions when you inevitably get some kind of illness. But that's it. So this is Travis. Definitely put a comment down below if you have any kind of insight or question, or you think otherwise, or you think of a situation I didn't cover. Put it down below. I'm happy to kind of augment the discussion in that way. Definitely check out GTS Rowing for my own coaching and consulting work. If you're interested in what I'm talking about here, you believe in the system, you believe in the philosophy and the methodology that I'm talking about, and you want to be a part of that, gtsrowing.com is the place to go. And otherwise, stay tuned, subscribe, like, and I'm sure YouTube will let you know when my next video comes out. Thank you, everybody. We'll catch you on the next video. Bye.